Without further ado, I am very excited and honored to welcome Madeleine Shaw to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamitsa, and thank you, Michelle, and thank you, everyone who had anything to do with me being here today. I'm super excited. Okay, let's go. And you noticed, smart people noticed that I changed the title of my talk at the last minute. I can be a little bit sneaky that way. I got super excited about something. We've been talking about this for so long, and then, of course, there have been very many recent things that have just kind of happened in our space. And so, anyways, never mind, it's all good. Let's move along. Here I am. So yeah, we know where we are. My name is Madeleine. Hello, I use she, her pronouns. And as Michelle and Tamitsa said, I've been a social entrepreneur for very, well, not long enough, really. Still excited. The most important thing on this slide is that I love growing things. And this will become important later in the presentation as I explore alternative sort of natural metaphors and models for business based in the natural world. So next slide, please. Okay, here's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about what I've done and some things that happened and some interesting metaphors, I think, for the current situation, what I'm calling late capitalism, where we find ourselves right now. Sort of the downsides, the upsides, where to go next. Of course, since you put me at the front of the room, we've got to talk about periods. Just how it is. Fortunately, as I said to Michelle earlier, everybody actually does want to have the period talk, I know. And so I'm here for you. And we're going to talk more about trees. And so speaking of trees, can anybody name what the trees are in this image? Anyone? Just shout it out. No? Okay, that's okay. They're called truffula trees, and they feature in this book, The Lorax, that I'm going to discuss later in the presentation. Anyways, fun. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is my day job. So the company that I founded almost 30 years ago, previously known as LunaPads, now known as Isle, which is short for Period Isle. We were one of the first companies in the entire world to basically open Pandora's box on what today is now a multi-billion-dollar industry worldwide, and that I'm going to tell you a little bit about later. So anybody not know what a B Corp is? We're founding Canadian B Corp, basically Jedi Knights of social impact business. That's how I think about it anyways. And there I am with my wonderful co-founder and CEO, Suzanne Siemens, UBC, BCom, 1988. Woo, UBC. And so that's me today, in addition to the book and a few other side projects. Let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, but I didn't start that way. I didn't go to business school. I don't think they would have let me in, to be perfectly honest. I went to Queen's, and here I am. Okay, so this is me leading a sit-in in the office of Principal David Smith, who's that kind of angry-looking guy with his arms crossed that, you know, a dozen women have just walked into his office to say, hey, can you please do something about gender-based violence on campus? Please, because it's hurting us. So we staged a sit-in. So this was the type of thing that I did at university, okay? This was my world. It's how I learned about leadership. It's how I discovered kind of my values as a feminist, as an eco-feminist, and how I just sort of learned that you don't need to just sort of accept that things are just the way they are. Like, as one minor example, I was an English major. My English 110 survey class, I walked in and I looked at the syllabus for the entire year, because I was curious, like, what's going to be on this? This is English literature, like, who are we talking about? There was not one single word, like not even a poem written by a woman for the entire year. And I was like, wow, this is broken. Like, this is a high-end academic institution who's supposed to, you know, be telling me how things are and what matters in the world, and I'm not even seeing myself here. So anyways, I initially resisted a career in business. I thought it was kind of an inherently exploitative activity. I didn't know much about it. I didn't know any entrepreneurs in my family. And, you know, my mom was a social worker. My dad was in the legal profession. So it was kind of alien to me. I didn't trust it. But over time, I came to see entrepreneurship as an independent means to infuse values into business. So, you know, if you're kind of a little bit outside the system, but using the system to your own ends, if you will. Next slide, please. My main example of this was this remarkable woman, Dame Anita Roddick, the late Dame Anita Roddick. So in the 1980s, I can't overstate it for you. I mean, a lot of you weren't alive then, and I appreciate that. But her showing up and creating the Body Shop was one of the earliest examples, along with somebody else I'm going to talk about later, and Paul Hawken would be another person, who actually explicitly were saying that values matter in business, and using that as a draw, going, buy from me, buy from the Body Shop because we're not testing on animals, buy from the Body Shop because we're reducing plastic in our packaging, and we're learning about our supply chains, and we're being transparent, we're doing all those things. Like, nobody had done that before. It was like, buy my mascara because it'll make your, eyelashes longer, and who cares about the, petroleum product content or where the product came from or how it was made or anything. So she was revolutionary, and for me, it was like, oh, I want to be like her. She was my role model, and so I would like to pay tribute to that, and also to the power of role models. Like, when we can see somebody who is doing something that we believe in, like, pay attention and let that land for you emotionally. Like, we don't all need to be leaders all the time. Sometimes we need to be led. Next slide, please. Okay, so early days. This is me. I got into this whole thing with periods because, for a bunch of reasons, as we know, I was already a feminist, thanks to all the things that happened at university, and was experiencing problems using disposable pads and tampons. I was allergic to them. It was uncomfortable. And I couldn't understand for the life of me why products that we had to pay so much for and that were marketed as sanitary and hygienic all ended up in landfills. So, me being the creative spirit that I am, I set out to make, these are very early products that I made, washable cloth menstrual pads and period underwear. You can see that I made, put into little Ziploc bags with photocopied labels. I'd go to women's conferences and sell them and, just promote the idea. And it was really hard. Whew, nobody wanted to talk about that stuff, believe me. And, but nevertheless, I persisted. And I persisted because I believed in what I was doing. And what I felt like I was doing wasn't just kind of a more sustainable solution to the problem, but something had happened for me in the course of solving for my own needs as a designer, so creating products that, it's like, I just need to have my period in a different way, so I'm gonna make products to do that. This is a theme we'll see later in the presentation. But what happened when I actually went to use those products and wash them is I did, for what in the 1990s was a highly transgressive things. Like, disposable menstrual products are inherently designed to allow the user to distance themselves as much as possible from the experience of menstruation, which we are culturally kind of conditioned to believe is desirable. Like, why would you? It's gross. Come on, it's a mess. One, you've got to put it in, wrap it up in plastic, and stick it in one of those containers, and do that thing, and that's the right, safe, sanitary thing to do, which basically implies that what is happening in your body is sort of a biohazard, essentially, and which is something that I reject. So when I went to go and do this, I kind of had a breakthrough. I was like, no, it's none of those things. This is just this perfectly natural, amazing thing that my body is doing because it needs to do it. And if anything, that should be supported positively and even celebrated. And so it was seeking to share that feeling of personal liberation that inspired me to create a for-profit company to market and sell the products. Next slide, please. Okay, so jumping forward, oh my gosh, so many years, like almost 30 years. I want to talk about my book and kind of break down this concept of social entrepreneurship, or at least my definition of it, because it's an evolving space. You all know this, you're in it. There can be a fair bit of nitpickiness around, well, it's only a social enterprise if X, Y, Z, or you've got to be, if you're an entrepreneur, it's got to be for-profit, and if you want to make a difference, it's got to be nonprofit, and blah, blah, blah. Anyways, I just take that all in a blender and put it on high. And so my way of thinking about social entrepreneurship is noting first that the social comes first. So it's not entrepreneurship with a social give back. It's like social is the motivating factor. It's why we are doing what we are doing. And it's just shorthand for any form of social or environmental impact. Entrepreneurship, look at all those vowels, come on. Of course, it's a French word. We don't think about it very often, but it literally means, it's a verb, it means to initiate or to undertake. How I interpret that is you're not joining something, you're creating something unique and original that was not there before. This is the act of entrepreneurship, to undertake something new and different. This implies bravery and risk. And significantly for me, of any size and scale, I think we're kind of obsessed with scale right now, and we feel like maybe we have a good idea, but if it can't scale, why bother? I basically spend my entire book disputing this idea, and I believe that the notion of entrepreneurship can and should be far more democratic and inclusive of everything from unincorporated projects to multinational corporations or whatever. So we link all that together. We get social entrepreneurship, meaning initiating social environmental change by creating products and ventures to support those changes. The greater good simply meaning something bigger, like you're not in it for yourself, you're in it for the greater good. I'd like to talk now, next slide, about everyday people, which is another part of this, the title, the very long title of my book. So who are everyday people? I'm going to be frank with you. Everyday people is kind of shorthand for anybody who is not a white, cisgender, heterosexual male trying to raise big dollars down in Sand Hill Road in Silicon Valley. So, because that is a very narrow definition of entrepreneur that unfortunately has become prevalent. Like it's just, I'm speaking to people and I'll say, okay, when I say the word entrepreneur, who's the first person that comes to mind? And invariably it's the Bezos, Jobs, Musk, et cetera. And that is who we have glorified in late stage capitalism as our heroes, right? They are building these disruptive unicorn businesses with these incredible valuations, regardless of the soundness of their business models. And which has always really jarred me, because in my 30 years, the people who I know as entrepreneurs, the most of them that I've ever seen and talked to and had conversations with in my life, look like these people. So this is a screen grab from the online launch of The Greater Good. And I think it's actually quite a good representation. Like, they're not all cisgender women, but a lot of them are. There's some trans people, there's some men. I'd like to tell you about a couple of them just as examples. And so my friend Nadia Hamilton in the upper right there, she's based in Toronto. She has a venture called Magnus Mode. It was based on the experience she had rather, helping raise her younger brother, who's a man with autism. So she used to create cards to help him go through everyday life, to remember every morning, this is how you brush your teeth, this is how you get dressed, this is how you go to the bus, this is how you go to the library, so on and so forth. Today, so she was a computer science student, she created an app that digitizes these cards that she now sells to huge entities like WestJet and the Toronto Transit Commission and Trader Joe's to help customers who have neurodivergent challenges, who are living with autism, to engage with their services. So incredible. So, but driven by a very deeply personal need. Like, this is not, again, someone who's like, I see a market gap in assisting neurodivergent individuals in accessing everyday services. It's like, no, she came from a very different place. My friend Patrice Mousseau, right in the middle, second one down, she spoke here last night. You might have heard her on a panel. Indigenous single mom journalist, who created an amazing natural skin balm to solve her daughter's eczema. This product called Satya is now sold in over 800 stores. She's an entrepreneur. She's a social entrepreneur. All right, next slide. Thank you. Oh, okay, great. Pulled a little, anyways. Okay, so making mistakes is the best, right? Like, okay, yeah, cool. I am in it. So zebras and unicorns, anybody familiar with this model? No? Okay, let's go. So we know all about these guys, right? This is the Amazons, this is the Microsoft Metas, this is all these guys. This is the move fast and break things, bigger, better, faster, more school of business. Whose principles are essentially individual, top-line focus, competitive, extractive, etc. So this is our late stage capitalist. These are the big guys. This is what everybody's looking, or at least everybody. Mainstream Wall Street, Sand Hill Road investors are looking for these types of companies. Zebras Unite is an amazing organization that was founded in 2016 by 4 women in Portland, Oregon. I highly recommend an essay they wrote called Zebras Fix What Unicorns Break. They developed this model the zebra model in contrast, in explicit contrast to the unicorn model, because as entrepreneurs, they were noticing that they were having trouble accessing capital because they were being told that their businesses were not scalable or they were too small. And they looked around and they, like me, saw everyday people creating businesses that were looking for solutions. So while we have move fast and break things over here, we have move purposefully and nurture things, let's say, over here, but that's never really caught on as a buzzy phrase. They argue that most businesses fall in this camp and deserve support and recognition and value, and I absolutely believe in that as well. And I think it's just kind of an interesting, fun, shorthand way to think about going beyond the unicorns. Also, let's bear in mind, unicorns aren't real. Well, my daughter thinks they're real, but I don't. And zebras, like Isle is a zebra company par excellence. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. Having derided all these individuals, I'm going to show a picture of them. My point here is that these are not everyday people. These are part of the late stage capitalist ideal. These are the heroes. These are the people who I would argue obfuscate the reality of the zebras of the everyday people. And I think that their business models are dying, and I think that I think it's time to be done with the types of models that these people have espoused and extractive linear business models. And I know, Bill Gates built big give back with Gates Foundation and so on, but really, I guess I'm just trying to say that I don't want to be thinking about these people as typical when we think about who an entrepreneur is and what they do into the future. Next slide, please. Okay, so no business presentation is complete without Dr. Seuss, in my opinion. I've brought my copy of the Lorax, and I'm not gonna read it to you because I don't have time, but I brought it because I was thinking about just looking for models, like looking for solutions, looking for inspiration. I like to look to biomimicry, and I'm gonna say more about that later, but I put this in here because I just think it's an important, even though it's a 50-year-old story, it's a critical parable for exactly what we are seeing right now in the era of climate change and in the failure of extractive capitalism. So as a super quick recap, for folks who don't remember, a youth is exploring a totally clear-cut landscape and happens to find this strange individual called the Onceler. The Onceler tells a story of how he came to this beautiful, beautiful, rich land filled with these beautiful truffula trees and proceeded to cut down all the truffula trees to make these stupid products that nobody needs, called the needs. And the Lorax appeared out of a tree stump. He comes up and he says, "Hey, Onceler, I speak for the trees. And you've got to watch it because they're not going to last forever. And I don't think that your extractive linear business practices are sustainable." The Onceler does not listen and proceeds to cut down all the truffula trees. He goes out of business and the ecosystem collapses. Bummer. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is actually happening in real time. It's not just Dr. Seuss, and it's, and yes, it's a children's story, but this is true. We are seeing economic unrest, inequity, climate change, real time, and we've all got friends in Eastern Canada right now. It's no joke. And yet we believe that the system that we're caught in is inevitable. It's the economy. We've got to create jobs. It just has to be this way. As the Onceler says, here's a little quote from him, "I had to grow bigger, so bigger I got." The imperative to scale. He just believed, in order for this business to be successful, it has to grow. Next slide, please. There's a lot going on in this space in real time. So this was a speech, an extract from a speech that was given by the president of Venezuela last week in the United Nations. And it really caught my eye because I was thinking about the truffula trees and deforestation and, Loraxes and Oncelers and all these people. And he says that the cause of the climate disaster is capital, the logic of coming together only to consume more and more, produce more and more, what the Onceler calls biggering and biggering. And for some, very small proportion of humans to earn more is producing a climate disaster. So this is a real-time photograph of deforestation in the Colombian rainforest. He's pleading for the world to help. Next slide, please. Meanwhile, it's time for some good news. right? Right. Okay. Yay. We all know who this guy is, and what a remarkable thing. Like, I mean, yes, there are some cynics going, well, it's pretty easy to give away your entire company when you're already rich and, whatever, but oh my goodness, what a profound act of defiance, of creativity, I'm not even going to call it generosity. Like, it transcends generosity. This is about doing the right thing in an era where there are very few models for doing that. So, as we know, this guy, Yvon Chouinard, has essentially instead of taking his company public or selling it to Nike or whatever, doing what most people do, again, the model of scale your business and then exit, make a big exit and, do the IPO or do the big M&A or whatever, this is what is celebrated. And he has said, that's not what I want to do. I have other higher priorities. I've always had other higher priorities, and this is how I'm acting on them. Really profound quote here. Every billionaire is a public policy failure that I invite you all to think about. Next slide, please. Okay, so he also is an everyday person. So he did not come into this market going, I'm going to disrupt the outdoor apparel market by promoting sustainability or something. He was a guy who wanted to climb mountains. And so he developed, climbing gear to do that, and bit by bit, things took off. It's also very notable to me that he's 83 years old. And I think that we are living in a time of, obviously profound social inequity, but ageism is one that is totally underlooked at. It's wild. We do not listen to elders. We don't pay attention to them. And I think we need to, and we should. And this is a great example. And I love the quote at the bottom that, anyways, it's being a bit obscured, but it said, truth be told, there were no good options, and so we made our own. And my point here is that he just would not accept, traditional business wisdom, which would have been, like I said, sell your company to the highest bidder and be happy and go and buy islands for yourself or whatever. And that placing his values allowed him to think creatively about different solutions. Next slide, please. Right? How could you not? Look, the mustache. Do you see? Do you see what I see? Anyways, I just did that for fun, but it was oh my God. And they say kind of similar things. Anyways, just want to have some fun. Okay, let's move along to period products. Woo! Okay, so I know you all like case studies. So this is a very messy slide. You're never supposed to make slides like this. Oh my God. Even the ones I had before with all the words on them, they tell you not to. Anyways, this is an intentionally messy slide because it is intended to convey a sense of chaos and a sense of Wild West, Klondike, everybody's, grabbing their pickaxes and going to seek their fortune in period panties kind of energy, which is exactly what is going on. I'm not making this up. I've been working in this industry for a long time. And there is, it's come into the mainstream. You can go to Amazon.ca, and unfortunately it's obscured under here. But yeah, so if you search for period underwear on Amazon, you get over 2,000 results. Oh my God, this would have been unthinkable. This would have been unthinkable even 5 years ago. It certainly would have been unthinkable to me in 1993. And for that matter, it would have been what's Amazon back then. Anyways, okay, so there's two pieces here. The good news is that these products have become mainstream and therefore more accessible to more people. More people have heard of and are using reusable menstrual products. Good, right? Right? Yeah? Sort of good, mostly good, or we're not sure. Jury's out, but anyways, there's more. Next slide, please. Okay, too many words. I know. So here's what I see. In this marketplace, thanks to the fact that we are still in late capitalism, right? So just the fact that these products are reusable doesn't necessarily mean that they're sustainable. And in order for brands to survive in this market, they are going along the biggering route, the Onceler route, the I need to raise tons of cash from Wall Street investors, or I need to court M&A from mainstream personal care companies, or I got to do this. I got to bigger. I got to buy more Instagram ads. I got to do all these things to survive. This is real. I call it financialization. The downside is that most of that money is going into marketing, spending it with Mark and Meta and the folks at Google, and is inspiring an entire host of just cheap knockoff fast fashion type products. So you can go on Amazon.com and buy 2,000 pairs of virgin polyester period underwear. And honestly, what's the point? Like, that is not sustainable. A few headlines recently around acquisitions, and notably this one at the bottom. So if you're not willing to invest in product testing, so period underwear are not regulated by the FDA or Health Canada, unlike menstrual cups and cloth, menstrual pads. And so there are class action lawsuits underway right now for the presence of toxic chemicals in their products. So who's winning? Investors, Mark. Who's losing? Workers, customers, because they're getting lousy products. And small brands are just being churned in. So when you're so capitalized that you can afford to artificially subsidize the true cost of the products that you're making in order to lower them, in order to capture market share. Anyways, it's all kind of going off the rails, and I'm not super excited about it. But wait, here's some good news in the next slide. Menstrual equity. Okay, who's familiar with this? Okay, some people, yeah. Okay, basically, like the radical concept that periods are okay, that we deserve to understand them, that everybody deserves to understand them, and most critically, that products to manage them should be available for free to everybody. Pretty cool. No way that would have happened when I was at university. Nobody was going to give me a free tampon, I tell ya. But now they're understood as essential personal care products, which means that institutions look at all these zeros at Western University. Western University is investing more money in menstrual equity than the entire province of British Columbia. Wow. Hey, UBC. How about that? So anyways, good news. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, this is a global phenomenon. It's affecting government policy. It's, anyways, there's a whole bigger picture here. It's affecting safety regulations, ingredient disclosure, tax exemption, and so on and so forth. Fun fact, menstrual products were subject to luxury tax in until 1973 in Canada, and only had the GST eliminated from them in 2015. Okay, next slide. So this is changing the marketplace for menstrual products, and this is where I live. So until now, well, okay. Let's talk about reusable products and disposable products just for a second. So if we're actually seeking to solve menstrual equity and you're giving somebody free tampons in bathrooms, you're solving it for about 3 to 4 hours before forcing that person to find another bathroom, assuming that they are on campus in the first place and they can find a washroom that aligns with their gender and the bathroom actually has products and you're not actually solving a problem. So the case for reusables at an institutional scale is very different. Everything's ultimately going in a landfill. And so, next slide, here's what this looks like. We're able to change the meaning of the value proposition of our products. So we've gone from being, this is a comfortable way to manage your period. Great, and it's pretty and cute and whatever. And the humble mini pad, because we understand our LCA data, prevents 2,300 grams of waste being diverted, 148 kilowatts of energy is conserved. Like, we have, all of this has been verified by third-party labs. And so it's changing how we speak about our products and what they're good for and why they matter. Next slide, please. This becomes extremely important when we're dealing with universities because of scale and having derided scale in terms of just, growth for growth's sake and more money and whatever. When it comes to impact, of course we want to scale impact. So this is an example. These are some assumptions that we prepared for McGill University when we were talking about selling them our products instead of disposable products. And don't read them, it's too much. It's just to show you that we do our homework, that my business partners is CMA. Next slide, please. This is what this looks like over 5 years when an organization of that size offers their students, in this case, but we also work with corporate entities like Van City, and many, many other institutions. Like, these are the types of changes institutions need to be making in order to be seen to be acting on climate change and also on behalf of gender equality. So I'm not, again, going to read all these, but the yellow line there is over 5 years. When you're dealing with a population of 15,000 people, you're saving yourself $3.8 million. Wow. In addition to all of this other environmental data that we provide to our partners because it has value. Again, this is something that didn't have value before, and now it does. People didn't used to recycle before. There was no recycling business. People just threw stuff away, right? The times are changing. There are opportunities here. Next slide, please. Okay, so all of which is to say, this is what I call a radiant business model or lateral scale, where social forces are acting on economic forces, on individual choices that are then scaling out from the individual to institutions to systems to society. And we are actually able to make incredible change. Next slide, please. Okay, changing gears a little bit. I know I've talked about Dr. Seuss and trees and my passion for gardening, but I think I actually tried to ask Michelle to bring this person to speak to us because she's a forest ecologist, so you may be thinking, why do we need to talk to her in a context of entrepreneurship? But I think she's important because she's kind of upended certain base understanding or assumptions about how forests grow. And why that's important to me is because until now, there's been this kind of Darwinian assumption that they're inherently competitive, that trees and plants in forests grow by competing with one another. So it kind of makes sense, you know, it's like, I want the light, I want the, you know, whatever, I want the water, I want the nutrients, and so they go up, up, up. So that was taken as an article of faith in the forestry industry to just kind of how forest worked for a long time until Dr. Simard actually discovered that it was very opposite, that trees were actually deeply connected with one another and nourished one another and even communicated one another. So I just want to posit this as one example of a place to look in terms of just shifting our mindsets, because we're not going to shift our systems until we shift our mindsets. But it's not just forest ecologists who are thinking about this either. Can I get the next slide, please? It's economists. So this is Kate Rayworth. She's an amazing circular economy economist, I guess. She's written a book called Donut Economics. And she posits the radical notion, next slide please, that this model of growth, the hockey stick, made of trees, guys, they're everywhere. This amazing, this kind of fetishized, if you will, model of business growth where there's this early seed, you know, stage, and then boom, it's up and to the right, my friends, exponential, here we go, getting on that rocket ship. Fantastic. Kate Rayworth points out, interestingly, that there's nothing that grows this way naturally. So there is no plant, no animal, no human. There's nothing in the natural world at all that replicates this trajectory of permanent, exponential, up and to the right. Literally nothing. Well, except for one thing. This blue line, can anybody guess what that might be? The one thing in the natural world? Yes, please, Sean. Close. You're very close. It's cancer. Yeah, so yeah, you get it. You get the prize. You get the Lorax. You get the door prize. Anyways, I just think it's an interesting thing. Like, it doesn't necessarily prove anything, but it's like, why are we trying to seek to replicate a model again and again and again that is literally killing us? Next slide, please. She posits instead looking to nature, cycles, things that go around and around, sustainably as models, not just for plants, but for organizations and for entire economic systems. And I agree with her. I mean, she points out, you know, in the case of a tree, yes, there's some rapid early growth, but a tree just spends most of its life generating oxygen and creating habitat for animals. And it's not necessarily, like, it only gets so tall. You and I only get so tall. We do not want to keep going infinitely up and to the right. Like, we just don't. It's not the way it's meant to be. This critical notion of regeneration is essential. So the purpose of all of these entities, these plants, is to regenerate, right? So I just think it's an interesting model, and anyways, I've made my point. Next slide, please. This brings us to the circular economy, which you're all familiar with. And I guess what I want to point out about this, again, is that we are going from something that has been linear to something that is cyclical. So we're changing the way we think about success. It's like, well, I want it to be bigger. I want it to scale. I want it to be faster. I want to make more money. I want to get more market share, to the value being around creating value for the planet and value for people. And we need to think about that as being success. So I think I have one more slide to wrap this up. Oh, I have 2 more slides. Okay. And interestingly, so, I'm a white settler standing up here going, oh my gosh, this thing about the trees and nature, and, we need to look to that to live in harmony and blah, 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 is basically what Indigenous people have known and been saying for millennia. And I think it's important to acknowledge that. And so there's an amazing event coming up in early November that's being organized by this woman, Carol Ann Hilton, who's an economist as well, and has written a book called Indigenomics that you might be familiar with. So I encourage you all to attend this event and see what she has to say, because this traditional Indigenous wisdom has preceded all of the Kate Rayworths and so on and me of the world, and I wish to pay tribute to that. Next slide, please. In summary, okay, we know this. The imperative to scale is killing the planet. Does having more money really matter when you've got all the truffula trees been cut down? Not so much. But sustainability can support economic prosperity in some really interesting ways if we're paying attention. And like I said earlier, like this whole menstrual equity market thing going on, massive opportunity, recycling never existed. Like there are examples that I know you're probably thinking of right now. So I do not believe in an either or of like save the planet versus, compromise jobs and kill the economy. It's like, I don't think like that. And I think we need to be like Yvonne Chouinard and actually reject like this sort of binary idea of either or and think beyond. I also encourage folks to think about what they want their legacy to be, who inspired you as a youth. Seek inspiration in natural systems. It's biomimicry, it's a fascinating field. And I think we are not separate from nature. We are of nature, and so we should be learning from it and respecting it. And to close with the words of the wise Lorax, unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing's going to get better. It's just not. Thank you.
I'm going to do some cute. That was. Can I give you a hug? That was amazing.
Yeah, and I'd love to answer questions.
Wasn't that amazing?
Absolutely amazing. That was kind of intense, so okay, on attention, please value. Thank you.
Can you hear me in the mic? Oh, yes. Okay. Okay, awesome. So we have some questions that have come in through Slido. Encourage you to add a question, or if you see something in there that's like, ooh, I want to know more, you can just vote it up. So I'm going to hand you back the mic, and then feel free to answer whatever you like.
Thanks, Michelle. Okay, excellent. Thank you. Thanks for the heart. Okay, so for eventual focus on social change, how best to fund when capital, Okay, well, there are some who are interested. These are impact venture funds, and I know some of them, and there's a lot of good people in that space. But I would even back it up a second by going, do we need this model of venture capitalists investing in entrepreneurs in order for them to be successful? I think things like crowdfunding are really, really interesting, exciting developments. And I would encourage people to think about, like, how would nature do it? Like, how do dandelions do it? How can we innovate in terms of structures? Like, why is it so hard? Why do you need to have $1 million and be an accredited investor in order to put some money into a company? Like, these types of things are changing, and investors are changing as well. So I would say that this is it's a great question, and it's something that's changing rapidly right now. Keep asking why, and what the alternatives are to that. And my co-founder, Suzanne, she's amazing. It's one of those meant to be things. I am an extremely right-brained, which is to say creative, nonlinear, visionary kind of person. That does not, business is hard for me. It really is. And it wasn't just sort of a values conflict. It was a matter of skill. I really believe that people, for the most part, honestly, what do we do alone? What? Brush our teeth? Okay, the rest of it, we need other people. Like, we really do. And I really believe in collaboration and partnership and less of a top-down perspective on relationship, and also this idea that, like, I need to protect the ownership of my company and somebody's going to take it away from me. It's like, if somebody comes along and can bring value to helping you, why not? Like, again, it's a mindset piece. Like, what are we trying to achieve? Is this for me to be able to control as much as I can? Or do I want to get involved with, in my case, brilliant left-brained person, trained finance, accountant, whatever, to help me figure out the how of running this business? It's like, of course I do. And, we're literally stronger together. And if trust is something that, again, is missing profoundly in the business space. I think we are raised in this kind of our adversarial, like the Dragon's Den. Look at Dragon's Den. Come on. Like, it's so awful. It's the, like, oh, I'm going to it's this wrestling, it's this, going to beat out the other guy kind of energy. It's like, why don't we have a show? I talk about this in the book called Barn Raisers, where entrepreneurs come along and they're like, I have this idea. And then the dragons are like, well, I could help you by doing this. And the other dragon's like, oh, I could help you by doing that. And then some random person in the audience is like, hey, I've got a spare $10,000, let me, like, whatever, like, let's do these things together. Why do we think about them as these kind of very aggressive, zero-sum things? So I met her at a community leadership course in 1999, and she was very, very disillusioned with her corporate career and just was like, had never met anybody like me before. And we're just very different, but we got along and just kind of were united in our values. Boom. How do we change the conversation of venture success to those who are successfully addressing the circular economy? What are the name metrics of success? Okay, so chapter 12 of my book is called Radiance, and it answers this question at great length. It's like, so if it's not, I raised $50 million in VC funding, and I've got, 100 people under me, and my, EBITDA is this, and my, market penetration is this, and whatever. What are the metrics? And this is where I look to things like, obviously, the SDGs are a good place to look. Like, how are you actually on a global scale making a difference? Being a B Corp is an amazing, extremely rigorous way to evaluate, what you are doing to quantify the change that you're creating. The exercise that we went through at Isle of doing all of our life cycle assessment of each of our products and understanding, I wish, like, why don't more people do that? Like, why can't we, see value in understanding cradle to cradle understanding, and like, why doesn't Apple support recycling of its products or transparency in its supply chain? Like, we need to ask for these things as consumers and not just go, oh, well, that's proprietary, or I want the cheap one. Like, here's the thing too, some people will say to me, isn't it better that cheap period underwear, they're more accessible to more people, right? Not everybody can afford a pair of $50, super fancy organic cotton period aisle, boxer briefs. Fair enough. And to that I say, period products should be free, not cheap. Should be free, not cheap. So how do we change who pays for these things, as opposed to trying to ask, 18-year-old students to fund those things themselves? Did you ever have to compromise the values of your company with the needs of investors and shareholders? I would say we've had to compromise the values of our company. Like, there's reality, right? You can try, and if our products are already the most expensive in the market, it's hard, right? And so you want to make them accessible, as I just said. So you've got to balance, like, running a social impact-driven business financially successfully is really hard. It's really hard because it costs more. Like, you got to pay for your PFAS testing of your period underwear, and it costs money. You've got to pay for your LCA. You've got to pay to be a B Corp. You've got to pay to have all this work done to make sure that what you're, to be a living wage employer, to, do all the things that we do. It costs money. I was in a room with an investor once, and he said to me, Madeleine, like, what you've created with Isle is so amazing. What you and CCN have done, it's like you're this model of, virtue, basically, and the way business should be practiced. But, he said, your margins are kind of skinny. And I just looked at him and I'm like, what? How do you think, like, this whole idea that we can make lots and lots of money and do it sustainably, I actually don't think is true. Like, I think that it costs money to be sustainable and that these are just necessary trade-offs that we have to make, or at least that is true from my experience. What might be true for others, I can't speak to that. So, but this is the essential task of social entrepreneurship, is to weigh those things, knowing that you're never going to get we're in an imperfect world. And that, we're on our way. You're trying to make a difference. You're doing something good along the way and asking the right questions. How can we blend unicorns and zebras? I don't know. Whoa. Oh, what would we call them? I guess here's what I want to say to that is that instead of looking for a few unicorns, we need to be breeding a lot of zebras. And so I know a lot of investors say, well, it's going to cost me, as much money to do the due diligence for, a $100,000 investment as it is for a $100 million investment. And, it's just not worth it. And again, this is a mindset piece that needs to change. So I just think we need to elevate zebras for now. I think we need to be trying more ideas rather than waiting for the big one, if you know what I'm trying to say. Can we flip the last statement? Economic prosperity supports sustainability? Yeah, I hope so. I hope whoever asked that is going to try and do it. And yeah, I think we can. Oh, decarbonize. Oh, how can we do this? I guess, well, we've got to innovate with steel production. We've got to ask why are we producing all this steel? Are there ways to do it more sustainably? Are there ways to produce that energy more sustainably? Like, it's the whole supply chain, I think, of asking, questions, the whole thing, like how do we reach this number without bickering? We need to innovate. And yeah. Do I advise early stage ventures? What type of ventures do I consider helping? I do. I work with social impact ventures. Surprise. And you're welcome to reach out to me on my website or via LinkedIn. We can talk. But the impact piece has to be there. How do I stand out from? That's a really broad question, but I'd say in terms of sustainability, like really having your ducks in a row, walking your talk, because there are a lot of people who don't. And so if you're going to say that you're green and that you're sustainable and then back it up, be transparent, tell the story. And also tell the personal story. Like, you better believe that those 2,000 pairs of period underwear for $10 on Amazon don't have a story. They don't have a founding story about someone who, wanted to help people feel better about their bodies and, so decided to take the plunge and, from being an activist to being an entrepreneur and this whole thing. Like, tell the story. Tell about, show up in this. It's not just numbers. Late stage capitalism, do you think capitalism chasing money mindset is any suit? I hope so. And I don't think we're going to have much of a choice, frankly, to look at the pictures of the Colombian rainforest and, I don't know. What's it going to take for Jeff Bezos, instead of just naming his company after a rainforest, to actually do something about protecting it? I don't know. It needs to be cool. It's people like you. It's go make these things happen. What other sustainable marketing channels can we use? Well, good question. Let's find out. Let's make them. There's always another thing. This isn't the end where we are. And that's why I contextualize it as late stage capitalism. More to come, people. And this is on you to create that and innovate, but based on wanting to make the world a better place, wanting to be thoughtful and nurture things instead of just move fast and break things. Okay, we're done with breaking things. Can we please be done with disruption? Okay, let's heal things. Let's fix things. Okay. Oh, does CSR really cost more? I think it does, and or that it recognizes, internalizes the real cost. I think it's both. It depends on who we're talking to, like what in the corporate space versus on the boots on the ground small business. Nothing of what I am saying, like just to clarify, this is all just me. I'm not speaking for entire industries or whatever. I'm just telling you my experience and what I think. So that's a good question. I don't know. And why was the name Luna Has Changed to Isle? That's a good question. Just to make it more gender neutral. So the name Luna came from a reference to the human menstrual cycle being 28 days, which on average, which not everybody is, but reference to the lunar cycle. It was a way for the company to change the conversation around being more gender inclusive in the menstrual space. And also because the name pads was problematic for some people. We sell menstrual cups, we sell period underwear, and it just became confusing to people that it was sort of boxed in that way. Cap and trade, I have no idea. Does the audience know what yeah, no. Can the speaker explain it? No, not really. Yeah, I'm gonna be honest with you. Happy to talk periods, not cap and trade. Okay, and anything else? How are we doing for time, Michelle? Oh, great, okay. My next venture. So I already have another venture. You notice that we did like a hyperspace jump of about 20 years. So in 2014, I founded an event series for girls that was a charitable entity that ran until COVID started. And so we ran events across Canada that celebrated the transition between childhood and adolescence and girls for them and their families. And anyways, that was awesome. So I did that. I also started in 2018. Anyways, working on a family-friendly co-working space called Nestworks. It's a nonprofit society. And that got a bit derailed during COVID, but was inspired by the experience that Suzanne and I had bringing our children to work with us because there was no childcare available. And at the time, business owners were not considered to be eligible for maternity leave. So we couldn't get maternity leave benefits anyways, and we needed to work, so we brought the kids to work with us, and that inspired the idea for Nestworks, which I'm still working on. We're going to be having some pop-ups in North Vancouver in the coming months, and so just the idea that, like, why do we have this whole, work life, like my private life is here, my home is here, and I need to go all the way or drive or whatever and get over here to go to work. Obviously, this has all changed in COVID, which is great, and essentially, or just asking the question, like, what if integration is the new balance in terms of work-life balance? Like, why don't we bring these things closer together instead of insisting on separating them? So I'm doing that, and then I'm thinking about, I serve on a bunch of different boards, and I am doing a journal, like companion book I've developed the greater good into a curriculum, teachable curriculum, and also a journal sort of companion for the book. And I think, how can we make sustainable products affordable for people struggling financially? This is where go talk to UBC, go talk to your employer, go talk to whoever has more money than you and get them to buy these products for you. Is short and sweet. Okay, you have been a wonderful audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Amazing. Wow, Madeleine.